Hello and welcome everyone to our first webinar of 2022. I can still see a good number of folks connecting to audio. We'll go ahead, give it just another minute for folks to connect, and then we'll dive in and get started. But welcome, and we're delighted you're here. Fantastic. So we're a couple minutes after the hour. Claire and I have a lot to share with you today, so we'll go ahead and dive in. So as I said, welcome everyone to the first DiMe webinar of 2022. My name's Jen Goldsack. I'm the CEO here at the Digital Medicine Society, or DiMe, as we affectionately call ourselves. I'm delighted to be joined today by my friend and colleague, Claire. Claire, before we dive in, do you want to do a quick intro?
Yeah, hi everyone. Claire Meunier here, Chief Operating Officer at the Digital Medicine Society. I joined at the beginning of last year to think more about sort of DiMe's model for engagement across our community, but specifically with organizations and how they're plugging into our projects. And then also to think about how our organization scales. We've more than doubled in size this year. And so all the systems, processes, and people that we need to do that is also in my realm. And it's great to be here with you all today.
Fantastic. So for folks who may not have joined a DiMe webinar before, we'll spend just a couple of seconds here reviewing some housekeeping pieces so you feel welcome, so you know how to get engaged, and then we'll go ahead and dive in. So just full disclosure, we are going to record this session, so slides and recording will be available likely later today in case you want to share with anyone. Also keep that in mind as you ask your questions. Anything too punchy will be on the record, so just full disclosure there. The other piece is Claire and I will be leading this more as a conversation than a presentation. We will be watching the chat carefully. If you have questions that come up along the way, we will pause and sort of address that question. We can either unmute you if you're somewhere you can chat, so you can ask your question live. If that's not possible, that's fine, and we'll simply respond to traffic we see coming in the chat. But we are certainly not short of material to cover today. As we said, we'll take a more conversational approach, but we welcome questions, and we'll be making time throughout the conversation to include you all in the discussion, as well as leaving some protected time at the end for conversation. So with that, let's go ahead and dive in. So as we said, the goals today are twofold. First of all, we want to talk a little bit about the state of digital medicine as we see it here at DiMe today. We are privileged to have a really comprehensive view of the field, mostly because of you, our members. Claire and I have the privilege of all day, every day, it seems, but that's a good thing, chatting to our partners, to our members about what you see out happening in the field, what you see as the opportunities, what you see as the challenges. That informs our portfolio of work. It also informs our perspective on the field. So we will share our views on the state of digital medicine. At the end, we'll wind up with some predictions. What do we see lying ahead for 2022? But I think most importantly with you all as our members, we'll be spending some time on DiMe strategy to address these key challenges. What are we doing in partnership with you, our members, to really address some of these challenges? What are the projects we have on deck? So what resources can you expect to be coming to your fingertips over the coming months? And perhaps most importantly, what are opportunities to engage during 2022 in this really fast-moving landscape? So I'm going to start with maybe a brief history, and I will try and keep it brief. Also, this is not going to be death by PowerPoint. We've got a couple of visuals we'll use here now and again, but we will spend most of our time in conversation. For folks who may not know, we actually launched DiMe only in May 2019. So on the one hand, it feels like a lifetime ago. There's been a lot that's happened in the world and the community since then. On the other hand, we are still a young organization, and I think our outsized impact is a consequence of your engagement with our work. So who are we at DiMe? I think it's actually quite a good starting point, a good way to sort of recalibrate at the beginning of the year. Our unofficial tagline is clinical quality work on a tech timeline. I think all of our colleagues here probably tire of me and Claire banging that drum, but certainly they are enthusiastic in pursuit of that with us and with you. We think about, as we said, listening carefully to you for what the pain points and the challenges are, And that's where our research portfolio comes from. And that's why we're so excited for our conversation today. We want to learn about what your challenges are, what your anticipations are for 2022. That's how our research portfolio is built out. That's how we conduct our sort of communication priorities. And increasingly, as you'll hear about today, structuring more formal educational offerings. Our mission, and I'll go ahead and stop sharing now so we can have a bit more of a conversation. Our mission is to advance the safe, effective, ethical, and equitable use of digital technologies to optimize health. And we'll get today into the weeds of the different ways that we address that by community building, by working with you guys through our research portfolio and through our communication and education activities. But Claire, I thought it might be fun today to start with a question to you. As you said, you joined just under a year ago, coming up on that all-important one-year anniversary. I'm glad you stuck with it. Tell us a little bit, with your sort of expertise and background to the, in the field, what was it that brought you to DiMe? What is it about what we're building together and the moment in digital medicine that sort of led you to us?
Yeah, Jen, it's a great question. I mean, I'd spent my career in market development roles around patient advocacy and health tech startups and larger tech companies. But at the moment the pandemic hit, I was in a high impact role working with one partner in one sort of sector of the ecosystem. And I think in that moment, it felt like what was needed now more than ever was this coordination, collaboration, getting organized as a field so that everything that was happening in digital so quickly in the pandemic could sort of come together in an organized fashion and in a fashion that actually could last and could, I say, like, instead of being duct taped down, be bolted down and actually be sort of the next version of what our field looked like. And it felt like, we finally had the wind at our backs. Digital medicine was going gangbusters. And if everybody's individual commercial efforts were going to come together in the end and really transform healthcare, we needed this close collaboration and coordination. And so, what started as a phone call to Jen to say, what other groups are doing interesting market development, ended with her saying, we are, and now here I am. And so it's really been, I think, a perfect fit. I think of it as a real opportunity to sort of meet the moment we're in digital, with a combination of my skill set and what DiMe was already doing in this market, and the impactful work that was already happening.
I love that. And everyone on the line who has been on the phone with me knows that those turns of events happen often. And when Claire said, hey, tell me about, who's doing great work, I was not shy to say, we are. And it all worked out for the best. And Claire, it's been a delight working with you this last year. And it's been quite the year. And it's interesting to reflect at this point, it was only this time last year that we'd really expanded our portfolio of work into the healthcare space. And folks on the line may not be aware of this. When we started at DiMe, we were particularly focused on digital measures. We felt that those digital clinical measures were the sort of leading edge. It's where there was appetite. It was predominantly on the research side of the shop. We saw a sort of broad range of opportunities across the field, but we started on the research side. And it was really last year that we stuck to our commitment from launch of getting out into the entire healthcare continuum and really trying to establish best practice when it comes to digital innovation across the board. Some of the things we think about are the fact that in the digital era, data doesn't live locked in a manila folder in a file cabinet anymore. The beauty of digital is that data can flow and that we have the opportunity to collapse individual health promotion, healthcare, health research, and public health. And we can do that if we are thoughtful and intentional about it. And that's our sort of reason for being here at DiMe. I also think it's really interesting to think about the new places where data can be captured outside of the confines of the study site or the clinic. And that's what we've been sort of thinking about a lot. So what was our strategy to get into healthcare? This is something that, you don't toy with. And so we've been very intentional. And my hope is that folks on the line might find this interesting. We've taken to date a two-prong approach. So almost exactly this time last year, it was during JP Morgan in 2021, we launched our Impact Initiative, the Virtual First Care Initiative, really thinking about taking the opportunity to support full stack care solutions driven by sort of digital modalities, but harnessing a whole sort of team care-based approach to clinical care delivery and saying, we have the opportunity with these virtual first innovators to build from scratch a new way of delivering healthcare, and we can build it around the patient and not the clinic. At the same time, and the second prong of this was our partnership with VA, which we are incredibly proud of. So folks who may not know, the VA is the largest integrated healthcare system in the US. And our approach there is the VA is very interesting. They are very innovative, and they don't face the same challenges around being driven by costs per member per month, because they are responsible for the care of the veteran for their entire lifetime. So our strategy has been, and I'm very proud of how well it has been going with two very, very strong partners, to say, can we take this most innovative approach? Can we use that to get the blueprint right of what care should look like in the digital era? And simultaneously, can we think about traditional modalities of providing care, and can we arm them appropriately and thoughtfully for long-term success with our VA partners? But Claire, you spent a lot of time actually last year sort of really thinking strategically about impact. You led some fantastic initiatives with that team. Tell us a little bit more about what resonated with you in terms of the virtual first care opportunity and how that changed through the course of the year.
Yeah, for sure, Jen. I mean, I think broadly speaking, in this virtual first care category, we're very used to seeing sort of mental health and diabetes, and those are the ones that have been added and sort of the models that everybody looks to. But I would say increasingly, and even before the pandemic, we're seeing more and more specialty care plays. So Crohn's and colitis care, endometriosis and women's health, as just a few examples. And so I think, I came into DiMe and served as the executive lead for Impact for the last year, and really was surprised at how little, the entire space had sort of moved to accommodate this digital revolution. And so talk about getting to work on the most glamorous parts of a problem. The very first place almost that I jumped into was the challenges with contracting, right? So payers for healthcare, and this one is US centric, but payers for healthcare, have a very clear way of contracting with providers who are going to have a patient visit. And then they have a very clear way of contracting sort of with technology, with a tech vendor, if you will, but not a very good way of contracting with a provider who comes with software wrapped around, right? And so our very first deliverable, or the very first deliverable I really worked on, was this contracting toolkit with a guide to contracting that literally went through every single aspect of a contract, from credentialing to payment models to coding, et cetera, and really worked through all the different components and what the virtual first care overlay there was. I think, having done this for a year and sort of seen how it plays out, with every new variant that comes up, I'm consistently surprised that the sort of en masse adoption of tech in healthcare remains sort of singular in the telehealth visit, and hasn't expanded a little bit further to recognize what I would call kind of version 2.0, which is really, it's not just the telemedicine visit that we have at our fingertips. We have things like wearables and sensors and apps and coaching modalities that can be done remotely, et cetera. And I'm excited by the models that have emerged in virtual first care and what people are doing in that realm. But really eager to see more uptake of that sort of more sophisticated, more complex tech solutions being integrated and sort of going beyond just that telemedicine visit. There are lots of great examples of virtual first care and how these groups are sort of putting the different puzzle pieces, if you will, of different kinds of modalities in tech and in care together to make these solutions work. And I definitely commend to everybody's reading some of the vignettes that we've put together in Impact to really give some color and some flavor to this concept.
I really like how you're talking about that, Claire, and it gives me a really good segue. And Ravi, I'm actually going to invite you, if you can, come up, join us as a panelist for a hot second and pose your question live. if you can. If not, I'll give it voice in a second. Because Claire, I think it's really interesting, even in the last sort of 12 months or so, and I think Virtual First, a full stack solution, as you said, it's software products and it's sort of care teams, and it might be sort of home tests from labs and this sort of thing. It is not a single prong. It is not one of the 300,000 apps in the App Store. And Ravi, you make a really good point, and it looks like you can't pop up and join, but I'll give voice to your question around, look, we just need something really applied. Like, let's think about a long-term care facility. They just need to answer a question. And Ravi, this is my take, and I wish we could get into it because you're always a great discussant here, is digital.
I'm on. Am I able? Can you hear me?
I've got you. Go ahead, pose your question live, and then I'll give you a semi-rebuttal, semi-jumping off point to keep grilling us further.
Well, my home is the senior living industry, and I assume this is the same problem, and it's across the entire healthcare sector. I'm a buyer, and I need to make a decision. And because of the fast-paced evolution of the technology and the number of options and the potential for and the risk of making the wrong decision, there's a tremendous amount of paralysis. So what we really need is some kind of a formulary that kind of says, okay, if you've got these conditions, here are the 4 vendors that you need to look at. And here's an organization like a Good Housekeeping or Consumer Reports that's vetted them. And you can make the selection in one step.
So Ravi, full disclosure, I'm going to start a very base response. We've absolutely thought about that because housekeeping makes a lot of money by charging an awful lot to kind of have people evaluated. But for us, and I'm keen to hear your thoughts on this because this is a chance where we get to talk strategy with our membership. So this is exciting. To us, we've been reticent to force standardization where the methodology and where the science is still emerging. So what we have is an awful lot of frameworks for a variety of different sorts of products that help people make those selections. But the idea of maintaining a formulary where what good looks like is still being defined and the pace is so sort of rapid has been something that we've taken pause on. The other piece, Ravi, I think is there's still a lot of education and movement around what the digital health space even is, right? We can think about this idea of there are the sort of the wellness apps, and then there are these individual point solutions that may be exclusively software, whether that's a therapeutic or whether it's a particular measure. And then there are these sort of full stack solutions that we're talking about, like virtual care. And when I think of something like Angie's List, which I happen to use, like I go to a different category for my window cleaner than I do for someone that we might want to come and help in the garden. And so while the landscape itself is evolving, we have been leading from the bottom up with, look, here's the science, here are the evidence-based frameworks. I recognize that still puts a lot of pressure on you as the buyer to say this evidence still doesn't exist. But if we are doing our job right, then we are starting to move to the field towards generating that kind of evidence, giving them incentives to generate that kind of evidence, and giving you better options and better information to pick from. And I think our VA work, actually, that we have on deck right now, Ravi speaks to that the best. They are ostensibly, potentially the largest purchaser of digital health sort of products as the largest sort of healthcare system. We are working with them to create almost a single sort of digital front door so that they can be clear about what good looks like. Our hope is that gives a strong signal and sends a ripple effect so that you can use that same data to make your selections. But curious to hear how any of that lands with you, Ravi.
I see some of the very active members of DiMe being involved in efforts like this. I know Andy Corvus at Human First, they put out something called Atlas, which basically gives you some kind of a guidance of here's, I'm a diabetic and here's a condition, here are some of the solutions that you can go look at. And again, from a disclosure perspective, I'm actually on a task force working with an organization out of the UK that's basically creating standards, and they're working with the NHS in the UK to create formularies, digital formularies for apps. There are 400,000 digital apps and health apps, and any given week, 1,000 come in and 1,000 go out. So this notion of, does this application say do what it says it's going to do? Does it keep your data? Does it have good stewardship of data? Is it secure? And is it working today? It's all of those kinds of things that need, and it's a ton of work to go make that happen. So you are going to have to get involved with some kind of a machine learning AI-based tool that constantly polls this and assures folks of a level of quality associated with this. So I agree with you. I think getting a formulary together is difficult, and the formulary will have level 1, 2, 3, and 4 type of deployments, right? So I think, but we do need it. If without it, it's difficult to make the decision. And the other part of the stuff that what you guys are doing in terms of making sure that the 3-pronged plug is standard across everybody, So I think that level of fundamental work you guys are doing is absolutely critical for that.
Fantastic, Ravi. Thank you for that. And we'll talk about some of our other projects. I'm thinking about things like sensor data integrations, right, which is a lot of the piping under the hood to help you actually sort of plug these things in and work with them once you get them. And the example from Human First is terrific. I'm very proud that Andy's built upon things like V3 and some of these other pieces that we've put out with their teams. And that's essentially our mechanism, right? Which is, here's the methodology, here's the best practice, now go forward and use this. And to see folks picking up what we've been throwing down has been absolutely fantastic. So Ravi, thanks for being on today, and thanks for a great question.
Thank you.
So, I think I hinted there, and again, Ravi, you were the perfect plant almost. So thank you to highlight some of the work we're doing with VA. So in a really fantastic collaboration with a team of clinicians and innovators who are so dedicated to serving a really important population, we have been able to do a lot of work, and something we actually hope to release this spring is some work from last year around sort of a value-based evaluation framework, a value-based framework for evaluating along a couple of different vectors, innovations broadly in healthcare delivery. More specifically, and Ravi, I think this will be of interest, is creating not just a framework, but an evaluation tool. And the goal as it stands right now is it will face two sides. It will face the vendor community, and it will also face the VA innovation community, and really coming and addressing some of those pieces that you were talking about, things like security, things like privacy, things like how are we getting the data in, things like not only V3 of a product, but clinical utility. Does this actually solve a problem? So there's an awful lot of activity going on, and I'm excited, certainly through the first half and into the second half of the year, to hopefully put even more tools out there and see more adoption of the scientific best practices that we've already put out into the field there. Claire, we've talked a little bit, and I should organize my slide so I can give you a bit of a backstop here. We've talked a little bit about the payer side today. Talk a little bit about the research, about the care delivery side of the shop, which was new last year. Let's go back. Let's focus on what's been our bread and butter and what sort of remains a strength and a need of the organization on the research side. We're getting innovative there too. Do you want to talk about payer workshops?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, DiMe got its start in our work in digital clinical measures, and that continues to be a strong suit for us in an arena where we continue to do work. I think, we actually launched the second round of the playbook last year, Jen, which it may be hard to even remember that was something that happened. But, we spent a lot of the summer really thinking about kind of what should come next in this digital clinical measure story. And increasingly, we're spending a lot of time thinking about skating to where the puck is going, right? And so recognizing that our digital endpoints library is booming. It's now several hundred digital endpoints that are being worked on. It seems it's only a matter of time before one of those is going to be approved. And so as we think about, okay, what happens after approval, then we recognize, well, payers are going to need to reimburse it, because if it doesn't get paid for, why should anyone care? And then after that, physicians are going to need to adopt it and actually start using it in their clinical practice. And so with an eye towards wanting to begin to socialize and sort of chip away at some of these topics, we launched a series of payer workshops where we're actually having those conversations between sponsors and various groups kind of working in the digital clinical measure development space with payers about how they're going to think about value for these novel measures, right? And so we've now hosted our first of the 3-part workshop series. And I think one of the key learnings from the payers was, it's not too early to engage us on this, right? If you were waiting until one of these is approved and then pushing us to think about value and put a number on what we would reimburse, you would be too late. And so, this is something we're used to hearing from our regulatory colleagues: engage early, right? But I think it just proves the case time and again that wherever we're going next, people need to be primed that this is coming down the pike before we're actually asking them to make a decision and take action. And so I feel like this one, we launched just in time as we now look towards 2022 and what might be coming.
Yeah, and I think this is, so Claire, I think that's really important, right? We've been focused, I think a lot as an industry and at DiMe, quite frankly, on what does regulatory sort of acceptance of these measures look like? This is where we start to edge into the predictions sort of part of the discussion a little bit. Claire, I'm of the opinion that we will see a couple of labels in 2022 where digital endpoints have informed that label. When we look at, for example, our endpoints library, as you said, it continues to grow, I think, for good and bad, and we can talk about that if folks have questions. But it's now at 301, I think, last update, unique endpoints, which is extraordinary. It's also a lot of activity. And when we look at some of the studies, some that date back maybe to 2016, they've already published results. We know it was a sort of primary or secondary endpoint. As we said, I certainly expect to see a label or two come through this year for new drugs that have a label based on a sort of digital endpoint. And Claire, that kind of innovative thinking, I think, cuts across some of our measures work. And the Nocturnal Scratch Project is something we have to touch on through the course of the conversation today. I'm incredibly proud of those group of organizations who put their hand up and said, look, we want to do something in the pre-competitive space to address the fact that within the endpoints library, there are now literally hundreds of unique measures that we can't sort of prepare our regulatory colleagues to get comfortable and to review these data because everyone's measuring something different, where we have a large community of brilliant innovators who are trying to differentiate themselves based on what they're measuring, not how well they're measuring it or the quality of the data or the quality of the measure, or sort of how well they're able to plug into your systems as a partner. A lot of opportunity here. And with the Nocturnal Scratch Project, for folks who don't know, we have this consortia of organizations who have come together and are really thinking about proving the value of digitally measured nocturnal scratch as a critical concept worth measuring through the eyes of patients and clinicians for new therapies in nocturnal scratch. In atopic dermatitis. And I think it's important because we're not only building out that evidence base, we're not only doing, and Ravi, another example of us, trying to put some of these methodological frameworks into action. Everything we've recommended through a variety of different pieces of work always say start with the measure, don't start with the widget. And we're doing that with nocturnal scratch. We're backing it up with operational considerations, with an ontology to support the deployment and the shared understanding of what nocturnal scratch even is. And then in a similar vein to what we're doing with payer workshops, really thinking about the value of this work and the value it will return not only to the sponsors who are investing in it, but also the patient community, the clinical community. It's really exciting work. I feel like we've chummed the water a lot here, Claire, in terms of active projects on deck. When we look ahead, we can talk about some of the other pre-competitive collaborations we're planning in digital measurement. But why don't I throw a slide up on the screen here and allow you to do a bit of a high-level walkthrough of some of the projects we haven't mentioned yet today.
Yeah, Jen, before we do, Cheryl's asking about the international scope of the payer discussions. And I told her that I thought workshop 3 was going to focus on that, but I thought maybe you could comment on that. You've been closer to how the conversations are evolving there.
Yeah, of course. Cheryl, great question. And Claire, you'll laugh at this. True to our clinical quality work on the tech timeline, we get to that international audience in workshop too. So that's coming up this month. And it's really interesting. And Yayan Clay, our Chief Scientific Officer, has done a wonderful job of leading this with our partners. And we've taken a US approach to start. And we've actually, as Claire said, conducted that workshop. We wanted to look across public and private payers, as well as some state-based and sort of alternative-based payers, and really think about how the ecosystem broadly is considering value, right? And the confidence and the data and the evidence they need in order to make those decisions and when they need it. The European one is going to bring a couple of different flavors of payers across Europe to the table so that we can really think systematically. So we're looking at conversations with colleagues from the UK, colleagues from Spain and Italy as a different kind of payer approach in Europe, the German market and also the French market. And by doing that, I think we cover all of our bases in terms of the different sorts of flavors of payer and HTA sort of evaluation across the EU market. So Cheryl, we take that really seriously. And in addition to some recommendations and a framework, we actually anticipate putting out a considerations document that actually will allow folks who are developing evidence to think about some of the nuances across an international market. So at a glance, you can see, hey, this particular flavor of payer is going to expect this information, and this is when they're going to expect it. We're still in flight. How concrete we're going to be able to be is to be determined, but it's a strong, strong team and lots of room for discussion on the table. And that's certainly what we're driving towards. They are invite only. Cheryl, I will connect with Yayan afterwards and we'll see what we can do. One of the things, and this is important actually, you are part of our member community, sort of full disclosure. If there's an opportunity within the balance of the different stakeholders to include other folks, we're happy to do that. Our goal is always to be inclusive. We also need to keep our eyes on what we're doing, driving towards success. So having balanced groups of discussants and keeping sort of numbers at a manageable level so we can actually drive towards conversations that dig into these tough questions is always a balancing act. But Cheryl, we can make sure we follow up with you. And certainly team, we expect these resources to be live in the second quarter. So even if you aren't actively attending, our membership always hears first and they'll be out in the world for your use in the near future. Okay. I teased it once for a second there, Claire. Let me throw this slide up and hand over to you. We've actually covered a lot of ground, but there's still a few projects that I think it would be interesting to fit into the landscape and for our colleagues to see how we categorize our work.
Yeah, absolutely. I call this the 4 buckets DiMe works in here. So, we think about dividing our work into digital clinical measures, regulatory science, healthcare, and population health. Of course, no one project squarely fits into one of those buckets. There's always bleed over and through into some of the subsequent buckets. But this gives you a nice, I think, at a glance of all the things that are in flight here at the Digital Medicine Society. So the sensor data integrations work we haven't had a chance to talk about, but this one is really focused on how does sensor data end up in what I'll call end user platforms. So on the R&D side, that might be a clinical trial database or data management system. On the care side, that of course would end up in the electronic health record or some system that would sit alongside the electronic health record. And this is both about, how does the data get there? But I think more importantly, how is it visualized? How is it surfaced to end users? And making sure that we're not just sort of throwing the data over the fence and saying, okay, my job is done, but we're actually thinking about, not embedding it, heart rate data, second level heart rate data on the 8th tab at the bottom and saying, great cardiologist, you should be able to figure this out now, right? But instead that we're actually processing that data in a way that's useful to, let's say, the cardiologist as the end user. And so that's a project that launched this fall and has deliverables coming out later this year. So watch for that one. We've also talked, Jen's talked extensively about the work on the Veterans Administration. Data CC is our collaboration as an official collaborative community of the FDA, really focusing to start their projects have really focused on equity and inclusivity in medical product development. So 2 projects in flight there. One focused on the deployment of digital clinical measures across contexts of use. And the second really focused on inclusivity in digital measure product development. So 2 very important projects going on there in an initiative that is longitudinal and constantly coming up with new projects, launching those new projects, working on them, delivering resources and continuing to roll through. Impact, we mentioned our work in virtual first care. So Impact is our initiative in that arena. This group is working on a really important body of work right now, focused on care transitions to, from, and between virtual first care. So, the recognition here is that virtual first care cannot function in a silo and ignore all the other home care and pharmacy care and traditional brick and mortar care that happens. It actually relies on that entire ecosystem of care venues. And so figuring out what the user experience is for both patients as well as providers between and to and from virtual first care entities is of critical importance there. Digital measure development, I think Jen mentioned some of our work in atopic dermatitis and our nocturnal scratch project. This one really, really exciting. It is our first demonstration project of the work in the playbook. So true to our show the field, don't tell them mantra, this is really an effort to think through co-development of meaningful aspect of health, a shared ontology for use with regulators, beginning some of those payer conversations about value specific to a dermatologic condition. All of that is happening here. And then we also talked about the payer workshops. So this gives you a really good sense of what Team DiMe is so busy doing these days. And we're lucky to have program managers who are leading the charge on every single one of these projects, and new program managers who are coming on board to lead some of the things that are coming soon, which we'll talk about in a second.
I think that's really important, actually, Claire. So Isabel Vanderkeer is leading our sensor data integrations work. Lucy Sesnikova is our powerhouse leading the digital measure development in nocturnal scratch. Not just an important work sort of in and of itself, but really writing the blueprint here for future work across the field and here at DiMe. As I said, Yayan's leading payer workshops. We have a new hire, so stay tuned, coming in to really sort of lead on impact. And Yashoda and Jean do a powerful job. Yashoda Sharma and Jean Chung at leading Data CC. And I do want to spend, Claire, just another sort of minute or two reflecting on Data CC. And I think that being an important milestone in our growth as an org, there are very few collaborative communities hosted in partnership with FDA. And it's interesting. So our mission at Data CC is a subset of our broader mission at DiMe. So at DiMe, we think about sort of digital medicine very broadly. At Data CC, we are specifically thinking about realizing the promise of digital health measurement for everyone. And as you said, Claire, collectively, we are very proud of our Data CC community for leaning into questions around inclusivity as their first 2 projects out of the gate. It is an issue that sadly, as a field, we spend an awful lot of time admiring the problem, reflecting on the problem, doing panels on the problem, and it's hard to actually get folks to do stuff. And I think they shared a lot of courage, and it couples a really powerful sort of community with our expertise on digital to really think about how do we develop projects inclusively? And then once we have them in our hands, how do we roll them out? So that is coming. I also think it's important to stress that what Yashoda and what Jean are leading is not constrained to inclusion. I'm proud they went there first, but there will be a rolling series of projects. As you said, it's a longitudinal community. That sort of North Star subset of what we do at DiMe will not change. And as we approach sort of later in the year, and we release those resources to all of you around inclusive product development and around successful and inclusive deployment, we will be looking ahead, and I think we'll tackle other issues related to digital measurement. And interestingly, we think broadly, we think across the continuum of care at DataCC. We also think broadly around what a digital measure is. We know that the OnStar system in your car knows what you weigh, and it knows that you may stop at the liquor store every night. This is not me, by the way, I work from home. You know, and they know there's all sorts of measurement. The digital exhaust that we all generate is absolutely enormous. And what's remarkable about the DataCC community is they are all inclusive. They are looking at this, they are considering what we need to lean into, and we are here to support them on that. So Claire, we started to turn the tide a bit there to look ahead to some future DiMe projects. Why don't I throw up a slide if you want to talk us through, as we think about what's happening in the field, how are we trying to support that here at DiMe?
Absolutely, Jen. Yeah, happy to. So in the digital clinical measures and really the R&D bucket more broadly, several projects sort of coming down the pike here, and lots of them really focused on core measure sets. So recognizing that our library of digital endpoints is booming with, you know, over 250 digital measures. When we take a deep dive into that data, we recognize, for instance, in physical activity, that there are over 50 measures of physical activity listed in that library. And here, I think we wonder to ourselves, are there actually 50 interesting things to measure about physical activity? Probably not. And so now increasingly, I think we see this opportunity for some consolidation and some appropriate efficiency coming in the development of these core of these measures. And so our goal here with this particular project is really to start to think about, you know, what are the 8, 10, 12 features that you should measure every time you're measuring physical activity. I skipped the Alzheimer's one because the output on that one is similar. It's a core measure set, but for very different reasons here. So the approaches in Alzheimer's, there aren't a ton in the library here, but I think there's a lot of activity going on specifically in digital clinical measure, very exploratory, very early stage work. And ultimately that work is going to need to go through meaningful aspect of health justification and then map the core measures from there. And so that particular project focused on a similar outcome, but a little bit of a different approach in terms of actually proving out meaningful aspect of health globally, and then developing the core measure set from there to have it map to the meaningful aspect of health that's developing. Next on the list is our regulatory path decision tool. This work we hear from top 10 pharma all the way to like 5-person health tech startup that clarification around the regulatory paths for digital health products is desperately needed. And here mostly we're talking about sort of the 510(k) and the software as medical device pathways that exist. But the goal here is really to develop a decision tool. Number one, should I be regulated or not? And then if the answer to that question is yes, then answering what path should I be on and what should that process of submitting to that pathway look like? And so this is one that we're planning to launch in Q2 of this year, and really exciting work that I think a really interesting constellation of partners is going to come together on. DataCC and Impact, both of those are our longitudinal initiatives that have new projects coming into them every 3 to 6 months. And similarly, both of those initiatives have joining periods roughly twice a year. So DataCC, again, being that regulatory community that is official collaborative community of the FDA, and Impact being our work on this concept of virtual first care. There could be some add-on work that happens there in care transitions. We've also talked about doing some work on the code set. We've talked about doing some work on evidence generation and what those evidence packages need to need to look like to be reimbursed by payers. So lots of interesting opportunity there. And last but not least, not a project at all, but our first education offering, which is a course on digital fundamentals, recognizing that the entire pharma industry is going through or is in need of an upskilling in the concepts of digital medicine, not just within the small innovation groups that have been doing digital medicine work maybe for a few years now, but really looking towards the broader sort of clinical and operations colleagues across all the portfolios who are increasingly being asked to integrate digital into their studies. And so there's a real opportunity here, I think, for those innovation groups to start to roll out mass education to sort of raise all boats. I'm just realizing there's one missing from this list that I do want to call out. And this one is more in the R&D realm, focused on driving inclusion in digitized clinical trials. So recognizing that we've done an immense amount of work over the last decade to ensure inclusivity in clinical trials. One of the potential pitfalls and potential downfalls of integrating technology is that, we may have a bring your own smartphone requirement or a continuous Wi-Fi connectivity requirement. And what we risk there is actually leaving out the very populations that we've worked so hard to ensure are included. And so we also have a project coming up on that. And so if any of you are interested in learning more about any of these projects, I'm gonna drop my email address here in the chat, and feel free to reach out. I'd love to connect with you all on any of them.
The dogs were barking and caught me out. So I'm going to reflect a little bit on some of our core digital measures set, and I'm going to use Casey's really good question as a jumping off point. Yes, there's been a lot of questions around, efficacy of new treatments sort of on deck for Alzheimer's. And this is really why we're leaning into this one as a priority, Casey. It is an area of enormous unmet need. And when we look back at the gold standard tool right now, it's the ADAS-Cog, right? It is a 30-page clinician-administered tool that was validated in 1985. And yes, some colleagues recently have been using sort of scans and imaging and this sort of thing. But ultimately, and I had a grandmother who suffered with Alzheimer's, and I know that was the tool they were trying to use to manage her, to diagnose her. And this is the sort of blunt instrument that we're depending on to develop new therapies. So Casey, it's out of scope for us to unpack sort of drug development itself, but what we are committed to is providing the best set of tools possible where the need is greatest to really bring sort of digital forward. And our goal with these is not like it's a small thing, but simply developing them as digital drug development tools, but as tools that can cut across healthcare and promotion and prevention. Why is that so important? We go back to this idea of sort of data not being locked in file cabinets anymore. We want to be able to collapse the divide between clinical research and care. We want to be able to capture data generated during routine healthcare and feed that into hypothesis generation and real world evaluation of new medical products. And so when we set out on these core digital measure sort of sets, we're thinking about not only where can we do the most good, where can digital do the most good, but how are we thinking across the entire care continuum to get there? And Claire, you also teed me up really nicely to talk about some of the non-project based sort of initiatives that we're building out here. We have a new colleague, Sarah Moore, an education expert, who is leading the development of the education offering that will roll first, which is specifically a fundamentals course for our pharma colleagues. But we have bold ambitions here. We're working on some CME, which we will announce later this year. We're working on some direct to learner that we will launch later this year. And there will be future offerings to a variety of different industries to meet the needs of their workforce. And it's something that's really important to us at DiMe. And this is why we're structured the way we are. we see digital medicine, and perhaps most importantly, successful digital medicine, as being the most interdisciplinary endeavor we can think of. Unless we have citizen scientists and cybersecurity experts at the table with ethicists and engineers and data scientists and product experts and clinical scientists and care delivery folks and healthcare executives and payers and investors and regulators and funders, we have a narrow window. This is sort of my spiel. We have a narrow window where we can get digital right out of the gates, and we don't wind up with ossified solutions that are as broken as everything that have gone before. So part of that is, one, communities like DiMe, where we bring all of you together and we can learn from you and we can cross-pollinate, but it's also making sure that the education is happening. The reason we have both corporate and direct to learner is we also take really seriously that the digital medicine workforce must better reflect the patients we're all here to serve. So by adding those direct to learner offerings, we hope to welcome new folks to the community, to upskill folks who maybe wouldn't have made it in otherwise. That's a really important value to us. So there's the education piece. We also have lofty member goals. We've worked hard to create an environment where we can really offer you value. I think more conversations like this, our colleague Kimberly Smith is leading out a wealth of engagement activities that will roll through the course of this year, things like new member mixers, and we've got our first of the year tomorrow, really exposing you to things like the research committee and all the other ways you can get engaged. You can be a member of the FDA network of experts. All of those are on deck, and we are committed this year to growing our community, to serving you all better, primarily because we learn the most from you. We are likely to do the right projects if we are listening carefully to you, and we are likely to have them make a difference if we put them into your hands. So as I said, in addition to the project-based work that Claire outlined and the education offering she shared, there's a long tail of additional educational work that's coming forward. There's a commitment to you as our membership to really grow there. And it's a really exciting time. Claire. We also have some sponsorship opportunities that we haven't really had before. So let me go ahead and throw this up on the screen. You want to talk a little bit about how this fits into our overall body of work?
Yeah, absolutely. So the sponsorship program was launched last year and is really an opportunity for companies to work with us one-on-one and bring digital medicine principles in-house. So each of the partners that you see on this slide are using different approaches to sort of tap into DiMe resources and get those integrated more broadly with teams at their organizations. And so we are trying as much as possible, for instance, when we work with one of these partners to tailor V3 to one of their therapeutic areas, we will then try and do a case study so that we can be external facing about the result of some of this sponsorship opportunity and this work that we're doing. But it is, I think, prime opportunity for groups that feel like there's a lot of socializing of digital medicine principles that need to happen. And it's a great way for us to get to work, at the more granular level with specific teams that are taking these things off the shelf and implementing them. It's been an incredible learning opportunity for us at DiMe as well to really see, how these things play out in the real world, and has also been a great way for us to get new project ideas. So again, if any of you guys are interested in exploring some of the corporate sponsorship, I'd be happy to chat about it.
Fantastic. And I'm seeing some great comments come in support of some of these ideas. So thank you, everyone. If we're on the right track, it's largely thanks to you. And Sarah, your note in the Q&A is lovely. I agree. I think we are at the right juncture now where we need to get the educational piece right. So excited to hopefully work with many of you on that content creation, and most importantly, on sort of supporting your teams and partners in getting ready to put their shoulder into all of the work that needs to be done and continues to need to be done, especially as hopefully we come out of this COVID period and can harness all of these tools. So let's do what we promised, Claire, to wrap up. Do you want to talk a little bit about your predictions, your visions? Tell us, I have a couple of ideas that I'll wrap with. Tell us what you see in your crystal ball for the coming year, what's going to happen in the field through your lens.
Yeah. What's going to happen in the field? I guess this is more my wish of what will happen in the field. I'd like to see our first digital clinical measure officially cross over from the R&D and the regulatory space into care. And actually, this means that we get to start to think about something that was my very first job out of college, which is medical education, and how do we get medical students, residents, fellows, and practicing physicians, you know, initially it will be in one particular therapeutic area, but over time it will be for the entire field trained on a topic. And when I was a young 22-year-old, that topic was geriatrics, because for many practicing physicians, it hadn't been brought up in their medical school and training curriculum because it was such a new field. But fast forward to today, I think that new topic is now digital medicine. And so, like I said, it's going to start out in one particular specialty. We're going to see a migraine or a dermatology, or some other therapeutic area, digital clinical measure get approved. And then that's where we're going to need to go with this digital medicine education. But, fast forward, I think pretty quickly, this is going to now need to be a part of every medical training, and not just for physicians, but broadly sort of all learners. And I think that is a huge opportunity for us as a field to really, we talk about priming people before something's on their doorstep. I think similar to what we're doing in the payer workshops, as soon as we have wind of what's going to come first, we need to start socializing that with providers of care in that therapeutic area. I'm also very excited to see where virtual first care goes this year. Like I said, I think there's a prime opportunity for us to think beyond the telemedicine visit at scale and to really get that integrated en masse. So that's me. What about you, Jen? What are your predictions?
You teed me up with a couple of things there. I think the education piece is important. And I do want to underscore that Smit Patel has been leading our first instantiation of CME in partnership with a medical school, and has also been sort of leading our VA work. So I want to recognize Smit. I've tried to recognize everyone. We also have the foundation upon which all of this is built, which is Kat Cole and Michelle Setzer, who many of you who have interacted with DiMe in a variety of different ways will have met. They really do provide the operational heft behind the scenes so that the rest of the team can sort of build on their efforts. And it's important that I recognize them to all of you as our members. But quick predictions from me. Yes, with you, I think we're going to see a couple of those labels. What I'm really excited about, and what I think we will see some real momentum on, are regulatory advancements through the course of the year. We've worked hard, including with colleagues at the Health Innovation Hub at the German Federal Ministry of Health, as well as FDA and around the world, to really try and learn with them wherever possible. We saw the DHT guidance come out on December 22nd. And actually, folks on the line, there are three opportunities for public comment that are available right now. There's the DHT guidance, there's an RFI from HHS, and there's also a congressional subcommittee from the Senate, a Senate subcommittee from the Health Committee, really looking for impact and input. So over the next week or so, you will see opportunities posted in Slack and in the newsletter for how you can get involved with the creation of some of those comments that we intend to make at the DiMe level over the coming weeks. So long answer, Claire, put in a few things there. Regulatory advancement, I also think a shakeout between point solutions and full stack solutions. I do not think we help anyone in research or care if we are trying to shoehorn a mosaic of 500 point solutions into every clinic and into every trial. We need to think at the systems level. We're starting to see it with the full stack solutions on the virtual first care side. And I'm excited for that transition that we see coming down the pike. So, gosh, with that, we've just about, talking at debate speed, got you through everything. Claire, go ahead.
I have one more prediction, which I think is already starting to come true, which is the growth of Team DiMe. So I do want to make a final plug. Team DiMe is growing massively. We may double again this year. And so you all are all sort of friends and family and close members of ours, but you also have incredible networks. As you hear about people, please send them our way. I just dropped a link to our careers page. It's also on our website. But would love your referrals of folks, and we're hiring across the spectrum, across all 4 buckets, across all the functions, both the stuff that's external partner facing, as well as some of the more in-house pieces. So please send your best people our way.
Oh, that was a good one to slip in there, Claire. And Elena, I love your comment. We certainly agree that pre-competitive work will transform the field. So final plug of the day, if you would like to present a webinar, we look to you as our member experts first. Michelle's email's there. She can help get you into the program if you have a topic that would be valuable to the full community. But otherwise, thank you, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. This is a busy time for everyone in our field. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your participation. There is a lot of work to do. We have a moment in time where we can be really impactful. We can get digital right straight out of the gates. We look forward to advancing the safe, effective, ethical, and equitable use of digital technologies with you to improve lives throughout the coming year and beyond. So thanks, everyone. Claire, this was fun as always, and really looking forward to a huge amount of work together this year.
Woohoo! Thanks, guys.